Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. I know we've been away for a little bit, but it's like they say, sometimes as you wait, you end up finding greatness. And I think that that's what we have here in this space. As you all know, I created this podcast with the intent and the vision of just bringing real dope people into the space to share real stories that I hope someone out there can resonate with, connect with, feel inspired by, or just be reminded that we're all human. We all have our own unique journeys, our own struggles, but that shouldn't stop us from still pursuing our dreams, our goals, our ambitions, or whatever it is that keeps you going. Joining me today is Esaú Molina, a proud son of Mexican and Salvadoran parents, and a first generation college graduate who turned pain into purpose. From growing up in a low income household in Houston, Texas, H Town, to becoming the only member of his family to attend college. Esaú has carved out a life commitment to service, equity, and building pathways for others to rise. Professionally, he's held it down across the country, from advising first gen students in Texas to teaching middle school through Teach for America to leading one of the most innovative college and career programs in Los Angeles as the director of career and internship programs at Alliance College Ready Public Schools. But what you won't read on a resume is what we're going to unpack here today. We're going to talk about what it means to carry the weight of first generation pressure and pride. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome, about mental health, and what it looks like to navigate masculinity and healing as a Latino man. We're going to talk about loss, love, and what fuels Esaú's fire to keep showing up for students and for himself. And of course, we're going to laugh too, because his journey hasn't been all grind and sacrifice. We're going to revisit some joyful memories, the sounds and songs that shaped his college years, and the moments of affirmation that reminded him you belong here. So whether you're an educator, a first-gen student, a son, a father, or someone navigating your own definition of success, I promise you this episode is going to have you feeling seen, uplifted, and reminded of your own power. Esaú, thank you for being here, brother. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Anything else that you want to elaborate on before I get into these hard-hitting questions?
No, I think you covered it all. I'm excited to share the journey. Just really speak from the heart. I wear my heart on my sleeve, so
Yeah,
let's just get it rolling.
I appreciate it, man. I see you repping the Longhorns too, so I love
Yeah.
that. We'll get to that at some point. But to start, right, I like to really ground us in the origins, the roots, and resilience. And so I want to start with home. What did growing up in a household like yours look like? And what are early memories that shaped you to be the man you are today?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I grew up in Houston, Texas. Shout
Mm-hmm.
out H Town.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in what you could say in an impoverished area. Shout out to Ridgemont Foe. If you know, you know. And we had to get creative growing up in that type of environment. What I grew up knowing was struggle. Like too
Mm.
often, I contemplated like what were we gonna eat,
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna be able to thrive, survive. It was mostly survival,
Mm-hmm.
but through that survival, there was a lot of joy. My parents were intentional about making sure that we didn't see the struggles as much. And I always have early memories of what that struggle looked like. There's moments where my mom used to feed us, cook, and my brother and I would be eating, and I'd wonder, why is my mom not eating?
Mm-hmm.
And it was because my mom didn't have sufficient amount of food to feed us all.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of environment that I grew up in. But I grew up around resilience. I grew up around love, passion, and being in a household where I have two different cultures. It was a beautiful blend too. And in Texas, the Chicano culture is strong, and we'll elaborate more about that later.
Mm-hmm.
But I really got a taste of two worlds. That was a really beautiful thing. And and I'm a brother. I was the youngest of four brothers. I got beat up a lot. I got
Man,
I got
had
thrown
to.
around. I got thrown around. I have bumps all over me because my brothers used to throw me around as a football. Like I was a tiny kid, and
That's
then I
hilarious.
end up growing up being the tallest one out of all of us. So that was a nice blessing. But yeah, there was just a lot of fun. Me and my brothers used to have to get creative on how to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
I used to always see commercials of like people going to Disney or stuff like that. I would have never imagined in my life that I could do that.
Yeah.
We used to create
Yeah.
our own water parks in the
For
backyard.
sure.
Like we would get the water hose, and like that would be our water park.
Mm-hmm.
We would just get creative because that's what you had to do in the struggle. You
Mm-hmm.
get creative so that you can find your own way to thrive.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about like the origin story of me. Being able to thrive in moments where you might not be able to, and just own the fact that you got to be proud of where you come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it made me laugh visualizing y'all doing like these water parks because a few things came to mind. One, Texas is hella hot,
Hella hot.
right? Compared
Yep.
to what we experience here in
100 plus
California.
degrees.
So y'all need those water parks, even if
Yep.
it's self-invented water parks. And then it makes me just be so thankful that you and I grew up in a generation where like our imaginations were a big part of, how we navigated world outside of our house,
Absolutely.
outside of school. And you having those four older brothers, I'm sure like they also planted a bunch of seeds in regards to like what play and fun could look like, given that they were a bit older than you. I wanted to ask what is like the age difference because you said you're the youngest of four, which
Yeah.
is dope. And I can't even imagine like five
Oh no,
boys.
it's 4 total.
Oh, four
Yeah, yeah,
total.
yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So four total. But so what was that breakdown in how many
Yeah.
are sisters? How many are
So
brothers?
yeah, it's just all boys. My oldest brother is currently in his
Mm,
50s. I had a brother that passed away. He passed away when he was 29.
mm,
Then the age gap. He passed away when I was 16. And my other brother, his name is Max. We call him Mino. He's the one that's closest to me. So our age
mm,
is about a 2 year gap, and we're super close. Like
mm-hmm.
it's just crazy. Like how I don't live in Texas anymore. Obviously, I live in California, and we pick up the phone and it's like we pick up where we left off. And it's like
Yeah.
we think the same things even though we're not around each other. So it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. So yeah, big age gap, but I looked at my older brothers as like almost another second source of a parent when I was growing
Yeah.
up.
You beat me
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
it really felt very much like that. My dad had to bust his ass working. He worked, 15 plus hours a day.
Mm,
And he was a welder but didn't get paid like a welder because he was undocumented. And so we were really kind of left with my mom and brothers, and they really provided a lot of the joy when we were
mhm,
kids. I
mhm.
have so many fond memories of my brother Eloy, who passed away, taking us to Astroworld, when Astroworld was actually open, and just being able
Mhm.
to like experience those things, even just the simple things, going to the mall and just enjoying the little moments. And so I'm so many fun memories of my brothers because we were just always out and about. It was never
Yeah.
about being stuck in rooms like these kids today, always being stuck inside. We didn't
Mhm.
have like the phones that you have now. It was like the
Mhm.
LCD screens
Mhm.
and all that.
Mhm.
But we made really big purposeful moments outside of the house.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so important, right? Just to be able to create those moments, and to just embrace that to the best of our abilities of being a kid, right? I
Yeah,
think especially growing up in those type of circumstances, it's very common for folks to feel like they have to grow up so fast.
yeah,
But I think what I'm imagining is your brothers wanted to make sure that you still had a fun childhood,
yeah,
right? Because I'm sure if they were sitting here, their version of what growing up in that household might have felt different or looked different, right? So
yeah,
shout out to them and my condolences for that brother that you lost, but I love that you are in a way having him still exist through just like the memories and stories that you share and
yeah.
still just being so fond of those moments. Um, what else was like a part of your household? I guess something that comes to mind, especially when I think about Texas, and I don't want
Yeah.
to generalize, but I know like religion and religious
Yeah.
practice tends to be like a really big thing in the state of Texas. Was that something that was in your household as
Yeah,
well?
I grew up if you know the religion, I grew up Seventh Day Adventist. It
Mm,
and I think about it now, there was a lot of turmoil and conflict between myself and my parents growing up.
mm,
But the one thing I'll say about religion is it kept me off the streets.
mm,
I grew up like the neighborhood I grew up in, it was easy to fall into drugs. It was easy to
mm.
fall into gang violence. But what the church did for me, it gave me a safe space to
Yeah.
be able to
Yep.
be a kid. And
Mhm.
I've had a lot of great memories, not necessarily about all the teachings and the indoctrination,
Mhm.
but more so like after church.
Mhm.
And
Mhm. With all the other kids.
yeah, we
Yeah.
we would play basketball every Saturday. Every Saturday we played basketball till like midnight.
Yeah.
The ladies out there selling pupusas, the abuelitas selling pupusas. It was just
Mhm.
I have a lot of good memories, and still when I visit Texas, I usually actually will still go to that same church with my mom.
Mm.
A lot of the people that still go there, and it's just a
Yeah.
chance for me to reconnect
Yes.
and see the old faces that I used to run around with. So and but I've always had a different belief, and I think I do believe in a higher power,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
there's just a lot of things within
Yeah.
it that I think put you in a box, and
Yeah.
I've always been one person to kind of step outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah, same, same. I grew up in a predominantly Catholic household, where we would go to church and whatnot. Um, but I had my own fair share of not so healthy experiences in those spaces that made me realize that I had the autonomy to make my choice in regards to how I wanted to practice my beliefs or
Yeah.
my faith. And I too am much like yourself in that very open minded, love learning about all different cultures, religion, and really just trying to make sense of them in regards to like how they pertain to how I navigate life.
Yeah.
So shout out to you for giving yourself that permission. I know within Latino households, religion plays such a big part of like the fabric of our homes and our
Yeah.
families, and it can be difficult, right?
Yeah.
To like let them know, hey, I don't want to practice this in the same way that y'all do.
Yeah.
How did that kind of conversation play out? Just curious for
Oh
anybody out
man.
there that might be finding themselves in a similar moment.
I think when I was a teen, that's
Okay.
when I got the most ass whoopings. Like I was still getting ass whoopings until like 16, 17 years old. And I acted out and I rebelled because, I felt forced to do something that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And, I complied. It wasn't necessarily, I found a moment when I was in that younger space to talk about it. It wasn't actually until I went to college. And, when you go to college, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
You really expose yourself to different cultures of the world. You're actually
Hmm.
able to kind of see from an academic perspective, kind of like what religion
Hmm.
does.
Hmm.
And I think, my partner and I talk about this a lot. Like religion, I think is a really great space, for people in struggle. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of research around people hold on and latch on to their religious beliefs because in moments of struggle, it's something to really
Gives
carry.
them
It
hope.
gives hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it was more so like just being open and talking to my family about, I do have a belief,
Hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be this specific belief.
Hmm.
And partly because
Hmm.
there's certain things about the religion that I just didn't vibe with, like, um, the fact that I have tattoos.
Hmm. Hmm.
Apparently, my body's my
A
temple, and I
temple, yeah.
ruined my temple. But
Hmm.
I'm like, yo, I just wanted to paint my temple,
Yeah.
like so I painted it the way I wanted
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And so those things like, oh, you're gonna go to hell, or you're gonna go to hell
Hmm.
because you listen to this type of
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what? And so there's a lot of conflict with my dad,
Mhm.
especially. My dad was a hard ass,
Hmm.
and that was probably the person I had the most conflict with. But I've learned to just kind of like
Yeah.
listen, and not trying to push anything onto them because both my mom and dad still practice the same
Yeah.
religion. And so it's more so just like listen. They still always say, "Mijo, go to church. Like
Mhm.
find
Mhm.
one near you out there." And I just listen, but I find a lot of positivity in life still.
Yeah.
I still do things that are kind of not necessarily ritualistic, but things that are good for me.
Yeah.
I do believe I have a strong sense of values. I do believe that I'm a good person
Yeah.
because I practice good things in life.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I don't think, because I've deviated from it, I don't think it makes me a bad person. And if you're ever in that conflict, it's okay to deviate. I think
Yeah.
a lot of times
Yeah.
the way we grow up, we think we have to follow the same norms our family put upon
Yeah.
us. I'm a big proponent about you need to be selfish for yourself.
Yeah.
You need to find your own path. And
Yeah.
sometimes it means conflict. But
Mhm.
conflict, unfortunately, for some of our families, they don't know how to deal with conflict either.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, our families a lot of times live in trauma.
Mhm.
It's a reaction to the struggles that they've had, and so I have to remind myself, you know, they don't necessarily want to go to therapy or address it themselves, but instead they use religion as a
Yes.
source or as an
Mhm.
outlet. Like I
Mhm.
like you prayed for it, but I'm like, all right, you can pray for it all you want, but you still have to
Yeah.
do the work.
Yeah. The
So
internal work.
I listen to them, but I know what I need to do to take care of myself.
Yeah. I think you and I belong a part of a generation where we were more willing to question things,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes, like you said, that was responded to with an answer. You knew exactly where I was
Yeah,
going,
my dad used to make this popping noise,
right?
like,
Yeah. Hey, man, the chancla, the belts, whatever it was that they could get a hold of. For me, it wasn't my dad, but my mom and grandma tried their best to catch me with those. But nonetheless, right? I think I don't know what it's been like for you, but over time, though, I think there has been a bit more of an understanding, at least from my mom and my grandma, as to why I question things. Because in
yeah,
me questioning it, whether in the moment they acknowledge that it was a valid question, with time they're like, you know what, that was interesting. You asked
yeah,
that, right? I guess I never thought it was okay to ask, or
mm-hmm,
wonder if these practices make sense in today's day and age. You know
yeah,
what I mean? When again, we want to be really I want to be careful in regards to not like disrespecting anybody's religious beliefs
yeah,
or anything like that. And at the same time, I agree wholeheartedly with you that at the end of the day, you got to make choices that are in tune with who you are and who
yeah,
you want to be,
yeah,
right? It's a big part of it. And sometimes that looks like stepping out of that box that maybe your parents or families kind of created initially.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
so I appreciate that. I just appreciate that openness and that willingness to share in regards to what that experience was like for you. Because believe it or not, like I have students who I support today where that conversation comes up,
Yeah.
right? Just like their conflict with their parents and some of it
Yeah.
being based on religion and just traditions and practices and expectations, right? And
Yeah.
so I love that we're using religion, at least in this case, as a way to just emphasize and give permission to someone out there to step into who they want to be,
Yeah.
even if that means having difficult
Yeah.
conversations.
And if it's religion, power to you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone finds their own path, and have a lot of folks who still practice, and there's no judgment.
Yeah,
It's more
for
so
sure.
I have my path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned something that I think helps us transition really great to our next question, although not directly correlated to the question, but you said how it was once you went to college, right? That you kind
Yeah.
of just became more exposed, more open minded, met people from probably all different walks of life with different beliefs, right? That I'm sure also helped enhance your perspective or expand your
Yeah.
perspective. But the question is, though, you being the first in your family to go to college, I want to make a statement first too, is no small feat. And so the question is, what was one of the toughest moments you faced in that journey, and how did you find the strength to keep going?
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's rough. You know, when you're the first of anything, you
Mm-hmm.
you kind of set a new path that it's uncharted. You
Yes.
really don't know what you're getting yourself into. And for me, the toughest choice that I made was my brother had just passed away now at 16,
Mm.
and the real tough part of that was deciding to be selfish for myself and to leave home.
Home. Yeah.
I left home at a really young age, and I haven't been back home since, like in terms of living at home. So that decision to leave home, leave my mom who was still in turmoil, who was still struggling, to chart a new path for myself. That was the hardest part. I still remember to this day. I got dropped off at my dorms, and my like they pulled up. My brother, like we moved all the stuff into the dorm already. I remember my mom, my brother, my dad standing there, and it was one of the first times I looked at my brother, and he just started tearing
Tearing
up.
out. Yeah.
And so I didn't want to cry in that moment because I felt like I needed to hold it all in.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to my dorm, I was just
Man.
bawling. I was
Mm-hmm.
just crying. And then
Mm-hmm.
I had this white roommate that I just didn't vibe with the entire time. And like, shout out to you, but
Yeah,
still,
yeah,
it was just
yeah,
a new experience. And
yeah.
I had this feelings of pain, and then I had to deal with this new person that was in close
Yeah.
proximity with
Who's
in this
just
new
there?
space. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, fuck. So how do I feel this? So that decision to be selfish, that decision to take a step that really changed the trajectory of my life. It
Yeah.
it changed everything for me.
Mm.
That was the hardest part.
Yeah.
But once you're in it, a few days go, it's hard. Weeks go, you're still gonna feel it. And I, as I work with kids too, like one of the biggest things that I always have to remind students when they go to college or they step into that space is that it's normal to feel all these feelings. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they get there and they feel like, damn, should I be feeling this? Should I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
homesick?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You should be feeling these things
Yeah.
because it's new, it's uncharted. You're about to grow, you're about to be uncomfortable. And I'm a firm believer that being in a space where you're uncomfortable is what's going to really help you grow in life.
Grow. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, man, that was the toughest part. And then just try to navigate the college system. I went to predominantly white university. I went to the University of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I love UT, but my first few months, years was tough. It was lonely. I would look in classes and there wasn't a lot of me. I would step in different spaces. It was hard to find connection. It was hard
Mm.
to relate to people because my people, we're spread out. That college has about 50, 60,000
Yeah.
students at
It's
any given time,
huge.
and our classes your freshman year are large, so it's just hard to find community. So that was another
Mm-hmm.
difficult part, just trying to find people like me, people who had struggled, people who were first gen, people from my background, people who grew up in poverty that I could relate with.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind taking a step back, like
Yeah.
your journey to even getting into college. Was that something that was always the plan, always the vision?
Mm,
Was there someone that came throughout your K through 12 journey that made you believe that that was something for you? Because, like you said, being the first in anything is so hard, right?
yeah.
So, the first not only to get there, but the path to get there. So,
Yeah.
what was that
I
like
don't
for
know
you?
what it was, but academically, I just always liked school.
Okay.
But weirdly, I never had a mentor. I never had someone who was gonna say,
Mm,
"Hey, SO, like I think you'd be good at college. You should apply."
yeah.
I only applied to one college because
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
I didn't really have support. So I went to the type of school where there was more focus on the folks who were doing things wrong than the kids who were doing things
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Mm-hmm.
in the AP classes. I did really well academically, but there was not much focus on me. And I'm not sure. And I can't blame the counselors. I can't blame, as someone who's been in education now,
Yeah.
priorities were different.
Yeah.
But those kids, like I applied to one college. I didn't even apply to financial aid my first year because
That's
I didn't
wow.
know it was a
Yeah,
thing.
that it was something
I
you
didn't
could
know it was a
access.
thing.
Yeah.
So I really, it was just this fire in me to want to have a different life. Like I grew up
Mm,
again, always being purview to the struggle. Unfortunately, I heard all the arguments about the finances. I heard
yeah.
all that shit,
Yeah.
and that really impacted me. And I was like, I'm not gonna struggle.
Yeah.
I don't want to struggle like this. So I was like, education could be my outlet out of poverty. So
Yeah.
I was like, I went 10 toes down for that. I was like, this is gonna be
Mm,
my outlet. And
mhm.
there was a moment where it wasn't gonna be my path. That same year that my brother passed away, my best friend was shot and killed a few months later. And it was, in between that transition or that period of time when my brother passed away, he passed away in February. My best friend's name was Joel, and we both were talking
Mm,
about college. Like, bro, we're
mm,
gonna both go to UT. We're gonna,
mhm.
we were both in the top percentage of our school. We knew that. We knew that being in the top percent of our class, we were gonna be able to get in.
Yeah.
Uh, when he passed away, that lit a fire. I was like,
Mm,
he's too young and he's not gonna be able to live this life. And I was like, I
yeah.
can't waste mine.
Yeah.
And so I made that decision, I think around that time, that senior year, as hard as it's gonna be, I'm gonna lock in and I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's also why I selfishly decided to leave Tech, or not leave Texas, but leave Houston.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, shout out to you, Esaul. You know what I mean? For context, y'all, I ended up meeting Esaul through our connection to the Making Waves Academy. I once worked there as a dean of student, and then Esaul later on worked there. What was the title that you
So
had?
I was associate director and then moved to director. But we met at a graduation.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we met at a graduation, and shout out to Johnny Blends, our barber,
Yeah.
who was another connection point for us. And I knew to some extent that Esaul had to grind and hustle to get to this stage of life that he has earned, that he has worked really hard to achieve. But to hear like some of these moments that, like you said, could have very understandably so made you choose a different path,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think anybody would have even like questioned or judged it or been like, well, yeah, like you're going through so much hardship, but for you to somehow see that hardship and then use it as fuel,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, it lit a fire under you. And if you don't mind me like asking you to be introspective right now, as this question is about to be shared with you, what do you feel like? What contributed to you being able to do that? Because that's like a power, that's a strength that not
Yeah.
everybody can do, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, reflecting on that, I don't know how I get this fuel, this passion, this work ethic. It's just again, it's through the struggle. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've even when I go back home, I
Mm-hmm.
still see family in struggle. And sometimes people like get stuck in the decisions that they make. And I learned early on that every decision that you make is gonna there's gonna be an outcome because of that, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to be cognizant of that. And so I think this fire really comes from the desire to never feel like I felt when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stuff that I experienced when I was a kid. And it wasn't just the loss of my brothers. It was bullying.
Yeah.
It was not feeling like I was enough. It was this
Mhm.
feeling of neglect.
Mhm.
And so all that kind of turned into this thing where I was like, the only person that's gonna build me is me.
Yeah.
My dad used to say this thing is like, if it is to be, it is up to me. He would say that shit all the
Mm.
time, as simple as it
Yeah.
is. And so that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I also got to experience my dad do something too that was pretty powerful. My dad, he's from El Salvador. He fled the
Mm.
Civil War.
Mhm.
He didn't know a lick of English. And when I was in middle school, he learned English so that he could then go to the community college so that he can be able to get his HVAC license.
Wow.
And he would work all day, and I would see him study until like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And that also like just kind of showed by example, like,
Mhm.
damn, like my dad can do this, like I could do anything
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And so that was also like a good reflection of like what I could do. And because at a certain point you're an extension of your family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I was like, this man could work all damn day and then still grind. I was like,
Mhm.
I could do that too. And so I did that, and I was like, I'm gonna find a way to grind and get to where I need to be.
Yeah, and I appreciate you also giving insight. I was curious, but I was trying to see where I would ask in regards to which of your parents was Salvadoran and
Yeah,
Mexican, and
yeah,
you just
yeah.
answered it right now.
Dad,
And
La Union.
yeah, yeah, man. Shout out, to all of our Salvadoran people and also to the Mexican folks, who also have played a really big role in just how Salvadorians made their way over here. The mother of my daughters, Her parents are from this very tiny village called Tejalpa, I believe, which is near Puebla. And she tells me that the mom, the grandmother of my daughters, tells me that when they lived out there, a lot of Salvadorians would actually go past that
Mm,
area, and they would house them, and they would
yeah.
kind of support them before they somehow made that next part of the journey over here. So there's a lot of interconnections
Yeah.
there. And so I appreciate just you acknowledging your father, his work ethic, and his own determination in regards to like wanting to progress in life in different ways as well.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate just like you sharing that, Esaul, because as we work with students, and I'm sure you can resonate with this a little bit, it's really like this art and this kind of dance of like trying to motivate them, but even beyond that, help them find that intrinsic motivation
Yeah.
themselves, right? Like I can only take you so far before then you like find it
Yeah.
within you to really get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And it seems like you were able to tap into that, even through the adversity, even through the struggle and the pain. Um, but I wanted to follow up with this question, which is something that you and I, because another piece of context and insight is we both go to the same gym. We both be in there grinding, hustling, as many mornings as we can. But one thing that we both have so much passion and alignment on is the concept and conversation around mental health,
Yeah.
right? And so you've mentioned a few different pieces. You've mentioned loss. You've mentioned, some conflict at home. You've mentioned the struggle of even your college experience, feeling alone, feeling disconnected. How did you navigate that mentally and emotionally, and what supported you?
Yeah. Mental health wasn't a topic growing
Mm-hmm.
up. It wasn't a thing. It was bottled it up, and you just gotta push through it. So at an early age, even when my brother passed away, I had one therapy session, and I really just manipulated and lied my way out of
Mm-hmm.
that session so
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't have to go anymore.
Yep.
And I wasn't okay though. I was a kid that I felt all these things. Like I said, I was bullied, and I was always a chubby kid, so I was bullied, and I felt like the other always. And because of all that, like my body kept score. There's actually a book
That's
that
called
that
that.
called The Body Keeps
Mm-hmm.
Score that my one of
Mm-hmm.
my therapists recommended that I needed to read, because in my 20s I had so much anger. I had PTSD, and
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
therapy has allowed for me to do is put a name to
Yeah.
things. Like,
Definitely.
I magnify things, and I have anxiety. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that was a thing. I
Mm-hmm.
would just thought like, why am I feeling all these feelings and nerves, or like, if something's happening. So, therapy wasn't a thing, growing up, and then it wasn't something that you really could like seek, plus access to resources were
Yeah.
limited.
Yeah.
I didn't have healthcare until I went to
Yep.
college.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to the dentist until I was 18. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to do a lot of things. There was a moment even where when I broke my arm when I was a kid, we had to take the bus to the free hospital, and I just remember that being a crap experience. I didn't go to the hospital for a week, and my bone had started to already heal incorrectly. So all these things compound
Yeah.
to your mental
Yep.
well-being.
Yep.
And so when you're a kid trying to navigate that, you're just for me, I just pushed it aside.
Yeah.
Like I just pushed it aside, but it did its harm. And I
Mm-hmm.
would also harm myself. And
Mm.
so I struggled. I think the first real release that I had, and I didn't realize that was a release until, I got older, it was when I actually gave my brother's eulogy. I was the one
Mm.
that delivered my brother's eulogy at 16. And that was a powerful moment for me, because I was like, my brother was such a happy person. He loved to make people laugh. And in that
Mm.
eulogy, I was like, I got to make the crowd laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I got to share his story in a way that would honor him. So I did that. And so that was a moment where I realized vulnerability is power.
Man.
Vulnerability, a lot of people, especially I think a lot of men will
Man.
think
Yep.
like, you got to hold your shit in. You can't really
Mm-hmm.
express yourself. You can't
Mm-hmm.
cry.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff damages you, and
Yeah.
you have to recognize that the more you can share, the more you can own your story, the more you're vulnerable, you'll actually become more powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what I lead with now. I lead with vulnerability. I share my story. Sometimes I share it, and sometimes depending on the moment it hits and I cry.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so it's just
Yep.
how the mood strikes, but I let those feelings flow, because
Mm-hmm.
throughout my 20s, throughout college, as a young professional, I went through this notion thinking that I was fine, but I wasn't fine.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I sought therapy that I really started to uncover the pieces of me that I needed to put back together. and also face the trauma head on. Because if you
Yeah.
don't face the trauma head on, it will eat at you,
Man.
and it will manifest itself in different ways that
Mhm.
you won't even
Be
recognize.
aware
Yeah,
of,
and you
yeah.
sometimes you don't even recognize who you are, the person
Mhm.
you want to be, because
Mhm.
it's crept up on you. Your body has held on to it for so long. Your body will manifest those feelings physically, emotionally, mentally, and you have to release. You have to face it, and that's
Yeah.
what's scary about therapy. It requires you to face the trauma head on. I remember one of my first therapists actually made me write a letter to my brother, and it was
Mm.
so surprising that in that letter I actually said I didn't want to be like him.
Mm.
And the reason why is like my brother like was just out in the streets all the time, always drinking, always doing stuff. And as good of a big brother he was, it was also like, whoa, I don't know, I can't believe I wrote that.
Yeah.
As much as I respected and idolized him, I was like, oh shit, like I can't believe I wrote that. But I faced it.
Yeah.
And so, therapy really allowed me to put a name to the conditions and the things that I had been feeling for the longest. And so I'm a big proponent of it. I think people think like, oh, you go to therapy because something's wrong with you. No, even when you're fine, you should go to
Mhm.
therapy
Mhm.
because you should be able to express yourself. There's always things that we need to talk about, work
Mhm.
on. And it's also good to have a non-objective or an objective view
Yeah.
of what you're doing in with your life, because we've been messing up in life,
Man.
and
Mhm.
we sometimes like brush it to the side,
Or
or
we'll
we
justify it.
justify, create a different narrative. I
Mhm.
see this a lot in guys in relationships.
Yep.
They'll
Yep.
like do stuff and then they justify it or like create a different narrative, when I see like, yo, you need to just work on yourself.
Yeah.
You need to love yourself. I
Yeah.
think therapy really allowed me to start really loving myself,
Mm.
which I think I didn't do for a long time.
Yeah. No, I mean, the way you put that together, brother, was powerful. It was honest. It was poetic. I appreciate you because, I think the concept of mental health is still something that's continuing to grow in the level of awareness that people have,
Yeah.
especially with people realizing that it's an individual experience as well.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people will say like, well, so and so didn't have a good experience, so I don't want to go. And it's like, hey, that may be valid. They might have not had a great experience, but you owe it to yourself to go see what experience you might have.
Yeah.
And I made a video a while back where I said that when you go into therapy, though, you really got to go in there and like put everything on the table.
Yeah.
Because the thought that hit me that day when I was thinking about mental health and therapy is if you go and only give 75% of the truth, then the therapist can only give you 75% of their
Yeah.
best recommendation, right?
Yeah.
So then when you go back into the world and you say to yourself, wait, what they recommended isn't working, is because you didn't give them the full truth to
Yeah.
work with, right?
Yeah.
So
Even
they
if
were,
even if it's ugly for you to face that
yeah,
reality of who you're becoming or who you
yeah,
are,
or
like
who
I
you
agree.
are, right? And
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it's also a space where you're going somewhere where, due to the practices that they're obligated to follow, like they shouldn't be seeing you anywhere else. So like that space is just for you to
Yeah.
be honest, open, vulnerable. Like you said, even if it's like ugly truths coming out there,
Yeah.
right? There needs to be a space where you have to just be honest. And like you said, especially for men, don't want to generalize, but I too have seen this experience where there's like a lot of self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lying through, like then they know they're lying
Yeah.
about how the
Lying through your
situation.
teeth and you're still out here
Yeah.
doing it. Like,
Right,
yeah.
yeah, and then wondering why things aren't working out the way you
Yeah.
want them to work out, right? And so I think
Exactly.
that's even more of a reason why it's so important for men to lean into this conversation, to lean into these practices and experiences, especially if you've got into the stage in life where you have the financial ability or accessibility or
Yeah.
resources to engage in just mental health services. And
Yeah.
so,
For
yeah,
sure, man. Yeah, like, and like one thing you said, like, a lot of people go and they have a bad experience. There's a lot of therapists out there. You have to find the one that
yeah,
works for
and
you.
that's another
And
real
so I
valid
was actually
point.
very intentional, because I was like, a man, I don't want to go with a man. I
Mm,
want to go with the
mm,
woman of color
mm-hmm.
who will call me out on my shit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what I did. I
Mm-hmm.
found I found a therapist who was a woman of color who was able to call me out on my shit when
Mhm.
I needed to.
Mhm.
And that's when I really started to see things differently, because I'm super anti-machista. I'm super
Yes.
big on
Yeah.
being you know, you know, the hate the sentiment of like being a simp or someone who's woke
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever, but
Yeah.
like you can put labels on me or whatever you want, but I'm gonna tell you one thing, I'm happy.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, for
and you
sure.
can't you can't take away my happiness,
Mhm.
but just because I put in the work,
Mhm.
you know, you
Mhm.
have to put in the work. And I think a lot of guys are afraid to do that because they're afraid what's going to come out of that experience.
Yeah.
But again, like I always tell people, the only way you're going to grow is if you're going to step into the uncomfortable. You have
Yeah.
to step into it. Otherwise, it's going to be a cyclical thing of hurt, of you hurting other people.
Hmm.
And you're not going to move past that ever. I know a lot of people who are older than me that are still stuck.
Still
And
struggling.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
damn, bro, like,
Hmm.
I can't do it for you though.
Hmm.
I can make recommendations, but you have at a certain level, you have to be willing to step into that fear.
Yeah.
And that's what stops a lot of people.
Yeah.
The fear, the excuses, but when you step past the fear and the excuses and you actually face it head on, life changing.
I think it's one of those things, right? It's kind of this really unique situation where some folks, even if they're not fully happy with who they are, they're comfortable in that
Yeah.
state, right?
Yeah.
And so afraid of like, well, if I go to this and I transform into something else, what does that mean for me?
Yeah.
Right? And how do I make sense of that if I've been living in this state for the last 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And so it's also, I think, just the fear of change, which unfortunately I've come to learn, not unfortunately, fortunately, I've come to learn that change is inevitable, right?
Yeah.
And it's about making the change just meaningful and
Mm-hmm.
significant in some type of way. But I love a few things that you emphasize, especially that of like being anti-machisto or machismo. I agree wholeheartedly. And like you said, at the end of the day, if you're happy, then who is like, why would anybody judge how
Yeah.
you decide, right, to navigate your manhood and your definition of manhood? But I also really loved how you said, even within the concept of therapy and therapists, you got to find the person for you,
Yeah.
right? So you might actually end up having a few not so great experiences because maybe that's just not the therapist for
Yeah.
you.
Just like a relationship.
Right? Just like a
Some are
relationship. You're
gonna
not going to
work.
just give up on looking for the right
Yeah.
one, right? Or
Yeah.
hopefully not. But I'll actually share with you in the act of also being vulnerable too. My first therapist experience, it was with a man of color, and without knowing it, because I didn't do that intentionally, or at least not consciously,
Mm.
that was the right fit for me because
Yeah.
I grew up without a dad, so I didn't really have many male role models.
Yeah.
And there was a moment within one of my therapy sessions, I forgot what I was talking about, but he's like, I have a question for you. Like, why do you choose me? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I just chose you. You seem cool. I read through your profile. He's like, no, like, why do you choose me more specifically as a Latino man, older
Mm.
than you? What could I potentially represent for you? And I was
Yeah.
like, damn, I never thought about it like that. I was like, but it probably has to do,
Yeah.
as weird as it may sound, with like my daddy issues. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like men have those too, especially when we've grown up without fathers.
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
I think it's so easy to just put that kind of like concept on women, but we as men struggle with that too. It
Oh
just
yeah,
looks so
and
different.
more than women.
Oh yeah, I would
More
say
than women.
more.
I think men are the biggest fucking babies. And I'll excuse all the men out
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah,
could come at me too. But
yeah.
I think they sometimes be the biggest babies, and again, it's the unwillingness to step into that.
Yeah.
So I applaud you for stepping into it as
Yeah.
well, because it's not easy.
It's not. It wasn't. It wasn't. But it was honestly one of the best experiences that I could have had because as I leaned into it with time, probably took me 3 or 4 sessions to fully lean
Yeah.
in. But I was leaving there crying like every session. But those tears were such a sense of like release
Yeah.
and just like liberation of things that I never thought would be okay to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, I love it, man. I think it's so important for us to continue all conversations around mental health, and I hope someone out there just really felt seen and just like understood within that concept that we just dove into. I want to transition, Esaul, and talk a little bit about just like your career trajectory,
Yeah.
man. One that I really appreciate, one that aligns so much with what I also love doing, which is that of giving back. And I want to frame kind of the question in this way. Your story shows a steady rise from advisor to director, but I imagine that it didn't always feel that linear, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like a smooth path. And so I want to ask you, what's one setback or challenge that felt like a breaking point as you were navigating like your career trajectory, and then like what helped you get through that?
Yeah, there's so many moments that I could think about because, like you said, it's not linear. A lot of times, we get pushed this notion that life is a certain way, there's this path,
Mm-hmm.
but life is not going to end up that way. Sometimes there's going to be hurdles, there's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be failures. It's how you bounce back. So I'll speak to one of the experience I had when I was starting to progress in my career. So I went from a college advisor. I saw a need when I was an advisor to get actually in the classroom. So I applied for a program called Teach for America.
Teach for America.
I got into Teach for America. Surprisingly, I was shocked because even back then, like it was a very interesting selective process, and they really focused on GPAs. I didn't have the best GPA. I was the kid that almost got kicked out of college.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I navigated that. That was tough. Then I hit a role where I was a manager and I managed a caseload of schools for this program that I absolutely loved working for called Emerge. And
Mm,
in that program, I fell in love with the mission. I fell in love with what we were
mm,
doing. We were making change in students' lives. Still connected to a lot of my students to this day. Like we'll kick it, like in LA. Like I have a student that
mm,
lives there, and we'll chop it up. And shout out Josue, we'll kick it.
mm.
And so I wanted to be a leader in that program.
Yeah,
I was like, I love this program. I believe in it. I want to be
yeah.
a leader. I applied for a senior manager role, didn't get it. Knocked me down. I had to shake off that feeling, and then I went to grad school. I was like, you know what? If they didn't see this potential in me, I'm gonna go level up another
Mhm,
way.
mhm.
So I applied for grad school, got into grad school. It was a really hard journey. Graduated. Another opportunity came up to apply for that senior leader position, senior manager position. I applied again. I didn't get it. And
Mm.
that failure, it made me feel like something was wrong with me.
Yeah, you start questioning
Yeah, it
things,
made me
right?
feel like, what am I doing? And because
Mhm,
at that point, I was starting to bring my authentic self to work. Like,
mhm.
the district that I worked for, it was very much like corporate-y. Like, you had to wear a
Mm.
suit, tie,
Yep,
like
yep.
all that. I didn't show tattoos. I didn't do any of that stuff. So I started to feel comfortable in the program that I was like, am I bringing too much of myself? And I started
Mm.
to recognize that not every place is meant for you to grow.
Yeah,
And it's not, sometimes
yeah.
it's not you,
Mm-mm.
sometimes it's the place.
Mhm.
So what I started to realize is like, you know what? I can seek opportunities elsewhere. There's a fuck ton of doors to knock on.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity that I then took to present at a conference in Los Angeles. I met my now partner there at that conference.
Mm.
There was a roundtable discussion about undocumented scholar support. Someone said some off the wall shit. I stood up and said something, and that caught my partner's attention. And that's the story that she wrote. But from that
Love
moment,
it.
I was like, we dated for a while, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna look for opportunities in Los Angeles. I'm gonna find
Mm.
opportunity where it wants me. And I have always wanted to leave Texas. Like I
Okay.
always wanted to leave Texas. So I use that failure as a mechanism to just continue to look for opportunity. I
Yeah.
use it as momentum. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people have failure and they get stuck in it. They seek so much validation into why this is happening, or there's something wrong with me. But I realize there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
me. I just have to find another
Yep.
opportunity. And I'm not gonna lie, like they messed up. Like I would have been
Mhm.
I feel like I've done a pretty good job as a leader, and
Hey.
I'm excited to speak about my leadership journey.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll say is I got an opportunity at the actual organization that I work for today, to lead and to finally lead a team.
Mm.
And it was that moment where I realized, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. Like I just needed a different opportunity, a
Yeah.
different space to thrive. And sometimes you need that. You need to step out of your comfort zone, because I was comfortable.
Yeah.
You need to step out your comfort zone, uproot your whole life sometimes,
Yeah.
shake
Move.
shake things
Mhm.
up, leave
Mhm.
leave everything that's familiar to you. And honestly, that has provided so much growth for me to this
Mm.
day. And
Mhm.
I don't look back. Like I look forward.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about what that failure taught me is you can't look back and stay stuck in the past. You have to continue to look forward, because that's
Yeah.
the only way you're gonna thrive.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. And I just appreciate just like the level of confidence that you unapologetically carry yourself with in the sense of, well, if they ain't want me, well, shoot, let me go and prove them that they missed out on somebody,
Yeah.
right? I too have had similar experiences, and I'm gonna give you one that I think you'll appreciate, especially since I probably haven't had the chance to share it with you within the interactions and conversations we've had. But I was once working for the YMCA here through a grant that was called the Young Men Empowerment Collaborative.
Mm,
We were going into high schools within the Contra Costa County, and we were doing young men of color groups, right? Talking about trauma, talking about community, and it was dope, bro. I fell in love with the kids, fell in love with the work, very similar with Emerge and how you fell in love with it,
yeah.
right? I was simultaneously finishing up my doctoral degree, and it just so happened that when the academic year was ending at the high schools, it was also ending for me at my doctoral program.
Mm-hmm.
And so I defended my dissertation, got the checklist like you're Dr. Martinez, and I got a meeting invitation from like the head person at the Y. And in my mind, I'm like, damn, they're probably gonna talk to me about different opportunities, probably gonna tell me, like, I heard that you got your doctoral degree. Like, let's talk about
Mm.
how you can contribute further, right? So I go into that space really excited. Bro, I go in there and she's like, yeah, thank you for being here. Unfortunately, the grant that we were using to pay you has run out. You got
It's
2 months
tough.
to find a new job,
Damn.
right? And like you said, it's similar to what you mentioned. You had just gotten your master's degree, right?
Yeah.
So you reapplied, and it's still like in your case wasn't enough. And here I was, getting my doctoral degree, and I just lost my job. Like
Yeah, man.
the way that life throws you curveballs when
Yeah.
you least expect them, right? I think I've taken it also as an opportunity to remember to always stay humble in the midst of being confident,
Oh
though,
yeah.
right? It's like that fine
Yeah, I
balance.
can remind you real quick.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
I was going through a similar thing this year. The program that I was kind of like you know entrusted to create from the ground up
Mhm.
was fully donor funded,
Mhm.
and I've had to advocate so much for myself and my team to even be able to just have a place still,
Yeah.
and it's still uncertain. But
Yeah.
what I could say is like I won't stop advocating and
Mhm.
I won't stop pushing because when you
Mhm.
believe in something
It's something, yeah.
you like you're passionate about it. Like I love the work that I do, and I found my way through education unexpectedly. I never thought in my life that I would be more than a decade in as a
Man,
leader
it
in
goes by
education.
fast.
It really was. I think the journey that I went through. This kid that didn't have support, this kid that struggled, and I see myself in the reflection of a lot of the students
Mhm.
that I serve
Mhm.
because sometimes people just need to be validated, people need to be loved and appreciated and shown that you can thrive.
Yeah.
And that's what I love to do. I love to support youth. Nowadays, I don't really get to work with youth as much. It's more so people management, but I get to support the people that support the youth. I get to develop programs. And it's all because of my experience, the trajectory. And it's just being unafraid too.
Yeah.
And one thing I pride myself in what my failures have taught me is never hide who you truly are. I bring my authentic self to every space that I'm in now.
Yeah.
You can put me in any space, a boardroom.
Mhm.
There's CEOs
Mhm.
around. I sometimes deal with donors. No matter what space I'm in, I'm gonna bring my authentic
Yeah.
self because
Yeah.
that's what makes me me, and that's
Exactly.
what makes me unique to this work. And
Mhm.
and I have the lived experience and I have on the ground experience.
Mhm.
No one's gonna take that away from me.
Man.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to be confident. Like you got to
Yeah.
be confident in your actions, and you got to be able to step up. You got to stretch yourself. It taught me the power of doing stretch projects.
Mm.
When I stepped into different roles, I always found the way. I always say when I step into roles, like, how am I going to leave my mark in this
Yes.
specific role?
Yeah.
And that's how I frame it. It's not about like, oh, how am I going to learn the job or how am I going to do
Mhm.
this? It's like I'm already thinking like, what am I going to do to make this like impactful? What is
Yeah.
this going to do to know that Esaú did this shit? And that's how I approach every job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I love is just you continuing to emphasize this like importance of just like being yourself in all of
Yeah.
those spaces, regardless of the student ties, regardless of the multi-million dollars that some of these donors might have, right? That you're trying to get them to donate. You got to show up as yourself because at the end of the day, like when you go out and do the work, you don't want to feel like you got to do it as someone else,
Yeah.
right? With wearing a mask. Like we've had to do that, right? For
Yeah.
so long in our lives in
Mask
different
off.
spaces, bro. Yeah, bro. Like you get to a point where you're just like, look, I know who I am. And
Yep.
if you don't see the value in it, then you weren't meant to see the value in it. And nothing I could have done, no matter how I could address today was gonna change that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love that because I tell a lot of my students that like be yourself, bro. Like, or some of my young women students, like be yourself with whatever that means. Make sure the major you're choosing is what you want to choose,
Yeah.
not because your parents want that for you, not because you want this title, not because you think the money is gonna make you happy. Because as you get older, you just come to realize you gotta have some alignment with like what fulfills you and what is like your purpose in life.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that includes a real big check, and sometimes maybe not,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, if you can wake up happy about going to work, knowing you do something you love, like what else could you really want in life, right? At
Yeah,
that point.
man.
And so, no, I appreciate you, SL, with how you show up, how you advocate, how you're such a great representation for our Latino community. I think we're really fortunate out here in California to have had you be willing to be so courageous enough to come out here. And so, shout out to your partner for playing a big role in that, man, because I'm sure you've impacted and changed so many lives out here in the same way you did in other spaces that you've had the chance to work at. What came to mind for me, so if you don't mind me being curious,
Yeah.
like what was the moment that made you fall in love with the idea of working in education?
Yeah.
Um, I know you went to UT, and I know we didn't get too deep into that, and we will, whether it's today or whether it's in a future episode, because I'm gonna have you back, bro. Trust me, it's the first of many. But what was the moment for education? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, man. I think when I was applying for my first jobs, when I graduated with the advertising and business degree, and I thought that was gonna be the path.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a internship that was gonna lead into a job at a startup, and I was like, "There's no fulfillment in this."
Mm.
Like this is just me organizing shit, like planning shit for these people who are
Mhm.
gonna make more money.
Mhm.
And then I quickly realized like I want to do something that's gonna be purposeful. I wanted to do something that's gonna be meaningful. And that's why I did apply to be a college advisor. And in those moments, I had these powerful conversations and powerful realizations with students that, like, just off of one day or one experience that you can have with the kid, like the way that you can impact them,
Mhm.
that impact is what I guess you'd say made me addicted to the
Mhm.
education
Yep,
world.
yep.
Like the ability to impact one's life, because education is the only career that creates careers.
Yeah.
When you can impact people, like I want kids to surpass me. I want kids
Yep.
to thrive
Yep.
more than me.
Yep.
When I see some of my ex students who are lawyers, doctors, software engineers who have gone to Ivy League programs who are thriving in life, and I had a small snippet of
Mhm.
that impact, that's what keeps me in.
Yeah.
And now it's changed. Like, I want to continue to create that impact, but I just want to do it in a scalable, larger
Mhm.
way. Now,
Mhm.
I have a life mission that I want to impact more than 1 million students in my life.
Mm.
How I
Mhm.
will do that, I'll get creative. I'm going to figure it out. But I'm in thousands,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Same.
so
Yeah.
one thing I just want to continue to do is that, like, whether it's building programs, scaling initiatives,
Mhm.
being a systemic leader, building things that are gonna be far beyond even the scope of like the city or state or
Mhm.
country.
Mhm.
That impact is what really in those first years of advisor kind of like what, this is my path.
Yeah.
And then I got into the classroom, and then I got then
Mhm.
I then I got to be in the space of college, being a college counselor, college advisor for over a decade, and I loved it. It
Yeah.
was a beautiful feeling. But all along the way, I just always wanted to kind of also step into leadership positions. I also like to lead. Like I
Yeah.
I actually love coaching the adults. I love coaching
Mm.
people because
Mm.
that is another way to create impact.
And that's a skill, man. That takes a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
patience.
bro.
So
People,
shout
the
out to
adults are
you.
messier
But
than the
there,
kids.
yeah,
The adults create
y'all
more
know
problems
who
than the
you
kids.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had some crazy experiences managing people, and I'm gonna tell
Say,
you what, man, it is. That's what's harder.
yeah,
but
yeah.
but at the end of the day, like it's taught me so much. It's
Hmm.
taught me so much about myself and how I can be an empathetic leader.
Yes.
Allow like my goal as a leader is to elevate, never to gatekeep.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think too many people sometimes see leadership as a hierarchy thing,
Yeah.
where
Yep.
you shouldn't see it as a hierarchy. You should more so see it as an opportunity to elevate others so that you can also create impact.
Yeah.
Because I see that as an opportunity to create the impact that I want.
Yeah.
If I can support others, I'm increasing my
Yep.
impact. And
Hmm.
so, like, why not elevate other people?
Yeah, I think when I've been honored and privileged enough to be in leadership roles where I've supervised and led teams of adults, I think my goal has always been to create more leaders,
Yeah,
right? Because
exactly.
then if we all get to that kind of state, then we're all leading together. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And yes, I'll understand there's a difference in title, and I'll acknowledge the difference in pay, and that comes with the difference in like responsibilities. But especially in the field of education, we should have an aligned goal, which is
yeah,
that of impacting the lives of our students in a positive way,
yep,
right? Beyond just the academics. Like, yeah, the graduation to me is a cherry on top, but if we can help transform a young person into a young adult who has
yeah,
like a sense of worth, a sense of belief in themselves and their capabilities, then we've won. Like, we'll figure
yeah,
out the degree part, right?
yeah,
But it starts with really just building them up as humans.
yeah,
And how they can exist and navigate in the world with that level of confidence and knowing that they have a support system in us.
for sure,
So no, I
man.
appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind me asking for those who are in leadership roles right now, and especially with like the landscape of education, like what is like some advice you would give? I'll be a little bit more specific to like a young up and coming leader, like maybe
Okay.
someone who just became a supervisor. What is something you
Yeah.
wish you would have
Huh.
known that you know now?
Do not strive for perfection.
Hmm.
When I became a young leader, I was working my ass off to plan the perfect meeting, have the
Hmm.
perfect outcome, so that the things that I did were a reflection of me, which I don't know why I had this notion that I need to strive for perfection.
Yeah.
But then as I got older and I stepped into other leadership positions, I started to realize it's not about the perfection, it's about the journey and the growth even within
Hmm.
yourself.
Hmm.
You got to be able to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as a leader. Like you have to be okay with that. It's okay to normalize that because it's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're human beings. You also have to be vulnerable. Like if you're stepping into a position where you have a team, the one thing that I think has allowed me to create strong teams is being open, being vulnerable, letting people know when you yourself are struggling or having a bad day. really actually like humanizing
Yeah.
leadership.
Yep.
Because a
Mhm.
lot of times, sometimes the people that you're managing may not be able to also open up because you have this shell.
Yeah.
And so, as someone who's just stepping into a position of leadership, I encourage you to, one, do not strive for perfection. Let yourself fail, bounce back, learn from those moments. Two, be vulnerable because that's going to allow you to build a team that's going to bring their authentic self to the
Mhm.
workplace.
Mhm.
And three, um, stretch yourself. Take on the opportunities to grow areas that you don't necessarily feel comfortable in. That's also an area that it's uncomfortable, like whether it's like you need to improve your excel and your formula skills,
Mhm.
or it's coaching.
Yeah.
Find ways to help grow yourself. And we live in a world now where you can find everything on YouTube. We
Man,
live in a world
YouTube,
now where
ChatGPT,
you can
like,
self-learn.
yeah.
So use the tools around you to learn, because that's only going to help you. It's going to create those, those, add those notches to your tool belt so that you can continue to grow. So yeah, those are some things I wish someone would have said to me when
Yeah.
I was a young leader, because I would have saved myself a lot of hours trying to strive for perfection.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can strive for that's perfect, but you can create some great outcomes still through the struggle with your team, and
Yeah.
just be okay with that.
Yeah, and I think something you said that I really resonated with, it reminded me when I was in the role of director of the Education Opportunity Program there at TCU Space, was wanting to humanize myself as a leader,
Yeah.
right? Because in being able to model that, it allowed my staff to also know that it was okay to share when they were having tough days, that it was okay to share when maybe something at home was a little off, right? For them
Hmm.
to advocate for themselves and tell me like, hey, Dr. Martinez, like, I think I gotta go home a little early because like mentally I'm not here,
Yeah.
versus them feeling like they need to be confined in that office for the sake of just being there, right? Even if they're not even there mentally because they're thinking about other things, right? And so I was really big on just like letting my teams know, like, take care of yourself in whatever way that looks like. And that's what I'm here for, to support you and being able to do that. Because if you come in as like the best, healthiest version of yourself to work, then that's when I know you're going to kill it,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
that's the version of you that I want. If we
Yep.
look at it from a sports kind of like component, right? I'm sorry, for the Rockets and the Warriors series, but
Shout
right,
out the Rockets. I still love you.
yeah, but right now, for example, for my Warrior fans, like Steph Curry's out, right?
Yeah.
And yes, he could probably push himself to play, but would he end up then compromising the team more because he's not right healthy?
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to just remember that, like, if you're not in the best mental emotional state, like, you might unintentionally cause more harm than good.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I think it's about just having those difficult conversations with our staff members and letting them know that it's okay to be human. And so, if you don't mind me asking, again, maybe for a young leader out there that's navigating like conflict or trying to support their team in that way, how do you go about creating such a space?
Yeah. Actually, in anytime I step into a role now, I have my team intentionally create a leadership story, and we also
Hmm.
create an identity tree. And I always start. And what I do is I focus on myself. I share my struggles. Literally, like week one that I'm managing a team, they know that I lost my brother. They know that all the experiences that I've
Mm-hmm.
had, they know all the things that I've gone through. I openly share the vulnerability. I exemplify it. And that kind of like serves as a catalyst for them to be able to do it. So when I do that and I create these intentional, purposeful spaces for vulnerability, that is a great way to do it. It doesn't have to be that specific way. It doesn't have to have people share their leadership story or their identity tree, but find something that can provide commonality between
Yes.
you and your team.
Connection.
Create openness,
Mm-hmm.
talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's gonna be moments of conflict still.
Yeah.
You can't, and you as a young leader, you can't shy away from
From
conflict, because
conflict.
what you allow is what you're gonna promote.
Yeah.
If there's gonna be negative behavior, and if you allow it, you promote it. You
Mm-hmm.
also, at the end of the day, are still a leader.
Yeah.
You have to focus on the things that are gonna help you drive for the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's one thing I'll say, like create the intentional spaces to be vulnerable, and also face conflict head on. A lot of times people try to move around conflict.
Yeah.
And, I was in a Latino fraternity, and one of our pillars was like, winners face the conflict head on, losers go around it,
Yeah.
and they never get past it.
Yeah.
So the only way you're going to get past it as a young leader is being okay. And so if that's something that you're conflict averse and you don't like that, there's like classes that you can take.
Yeah.
There's things that you can read about. Try them out. See what works for you.
Yeah.
But that's something that I realized too. Like, now I'm just like not afraid to like
Yeah.
face things, and
Uh-huh.
then also own your own mistakes. Sometimes you
Yeah.
mess up, and you have to own when you
Yeah.
mess up
Take
and be.
accountability.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
accountability is key as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't take accountability, and then people are not going to respect you.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that the people I work with respect me because I do take
Yeah.
accountability. I own my actions,
Hmm.
but I provide that space.
For
Like similar
sure.
to you, like I also had instances where I had staff where they were struggling, and I
Hmm.
could see it. Because
Hmm.
I'm an empath. I could
Same,
feel,
bro.
and
Same.
so when I see it, I'm like, you know what? You're not gonna be able to show up as your best self if
Hmm.
you're not taking care of you.
Hmm.
Prioritize yourself because
Yeah.
guess what? I'm gonna prioritize myself
Yeah.
too. Because at the end of the day, I have to. No
Yeah.
one's gonna do it for you but yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have a leader that'll allow you to do it, and sometimes you won't. Be that leader that allows people to prioritize
Yes.
themselves because
Yeah.
you're gonna get better work. You're gonna get better outcomes when you show people you value them, bro. They will show up for you.
Yeah, they will. They'll
Yeah,
go above and beyond, bro. That's
yeah,
what I've come to learn. And it's not even like in this manipulative way. It's just in this way that I think very much embodies that of like communities,
yeah,
right? Who feel connected, who feel aligned, who feel supported. And I think no differently than in a romantic relationship, right? Like open communication, honest communication is key. Trust is
yeah.
important, right? Can they trust you? And that trust is also, can I trust you to take accountability? Like you said, when as a leader, we might fall short,
Yep.
right? And just being able to own that, because then it shows them that, again, like
Yeah.
you said, you've gotten rid of this idea of being a perfectionist, and instead you're just real about how the work is going. And it's not going to be perfect all the
Yeah.
time, right? Especially in the field of
For
education.
sure.
There's so many things that are out of our control as much as we want to control it, right?
Yeah.
And so, no, that was really dope insight. And I know someone out there, heck, even as I was listening to you, I was like, yeah, I could have used that when I was a young leader. And I'll even be transparent and candid with you. That's something I still struggle with and played a role in me really, really wanting to get back to working with students, was the conflict part, because that
Yeah.
part is can be really
It's
challenging.
tough, man.
Different personalities, you know
Yep.
what I mean? Especially in today's day and age, I'm just gonna name, you got to be really careful with what you say,
Yeah.
how you frame it, how you say it, to make sure that it's not coming off as offensive or triggering in some type of way. And so, if you don't mind me asking, maybe that's the last kind of like inquiry I'll make for someone out there who I think that they could find this helpful. How do you navigate conflict in a way that's careful yet still intentional?
Yeah. I use a question based approach.
Mm,
So as opposed to approaching someone in what could be seen as an aggressive
yeah.
manner or anything like that, I instead invite someone to come and actually I ask questions and allow them to reflect.
Mm,
Instead of calling the behavior, I ask questions about the experience. I ask questions about how they feel.
yeah.
And doing that, then they get to put a name to it. And sometimes it works in the sense that they actually are then able to call it out. Like, oh shit, actually, yeah, I didn't need to do that. Or maybe it wasn't solved in that one day. You also got to be okay knowing that, things are not always going to be resolved in the first little, redirection.
Yeah.
And so a question based approach can allow you to one understand even maybe there's something internal, maybe there's something
Mhm.
going on with this person,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it took some failure to get there. Trust me. There's moments where I've had opportunities, to delve into that, and it did not work. It did
Yeah.
not go the right way. But I was like, I'm gonna find something that's gonna work. And for me, I think that's something that has really worked when you allow people to actually just share. You don't go in there combative. You never go in combative.
Yeah.
Never. You never address someone in front of a group. You
Yeah.
always give a private space.
Yeah.
You always affirm, and then you allow them to express themselves. And I think that creates a stepping stone to be able to work through the conflict.
Yeah.
Because then you need to, just like with the kid, you need to tell your kid too when you mess up, or like when kids are learning how to process their feelings and emotions. I think adults are still trying to do that every single day.
Man, yep.
So
Mhm.
you need to give them that space and then show them you're doing the same thing. So you need to then say, I I appreciate you for saying that, but I'm going to tell you how this made me
Yeah.
feel when you did this.
Yeah.
Because you actually have to name it. And same thing in a relationship. You
Mhm.
have to do this in a
Mhm.
relationship. You have to name
Mhm.
those things, because if you don't, passive aggressiveness starts.
Yeah.
In the workplace, passive aggressiveness is the
Oh, it's
thing that
the
I hate the
worst,
most.
man.
So I
Yeah.
rather deal with all that stuff because I don't like that stuff to fester. Because
Yeah.
the worst thing that could happen is then it creates a toxic work
Toxic
culture.
work
And you
environment.
don't want a toxic work environment, because then you're not going to feel like going. It doesn't feel like a safe space even for yourself as a leader.
Yeah.
You avoid things.
Yeah.
So when you're able to do that, I think like that, that's one way.
Yeah.
Obviously there's probably other ways.
No,
There's
no,
probably better
but
leaders out there that could do it better, but that's one that I try. And then I also make sure that I share how I feel,
yeah.
because if you don't, then they're not. How are they gonna know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like the question approach to support the reflection piece,
Yeah,
right? And I think like you said, in the midst of that reflection, you may come to find out, and they may come to find out, they that they might have lashed out at work because of something totally unrelated, right? That they were just holding on to, that they were carrying, and that it just came out in this particular type of way,
Yep.
in this particular setting. But I agree wholeheartedly with you in regards to like really wanting to preserve as healthy of a work environment as you can, especially when working with students in any capacity, because the last thing you want is for students to have to enter that space and also
Yeah.
be impacted by the fact that the adults can't get their stuff together. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Nothing
Like
more
that's
embarrassing
yeah.
than a kid coming in and like, what is this
What's going
toxic
on?
place? Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's like you said, it's embarrassing because we're supposed to be the adults in education.
Yeah.
I'm not saying folks got to be perfect, right? But there should be a level of awareness to know that like we're there to also model for like our
Yeah.
students how to
And they're
navigate those moments.
watching.
They are
They're always
watching,
watching
bro.
every little thing.
I always say, if you want to know the truth, ask like a kid about somebody.
They'll
They'll
let you
tell
know real
you
quick.
real quick
Real
if they
quick.
think highly
Fuck
or
around
not
and
so
find out.
highly
You'll
about
find out.
somebody. You know what I mean? And so, that doesn't go away even once you start working with older students. If anything, they're even that much more aware of some of the
Yeah.
tension that may exist in spaces. And so, I appreciate you, man, just for the effort that you put into just maintaining, like I said, as healthy of a work environment. And I'm sure that your employees, your coworkers, your colleagues, like they all appreciate just like your efforts towards that. Um, so I just want to name Esaul that I want to make sure we don't overextend the episode just for the sake of viewer capacity. And so I'm gonna ask a few more questions to
Yeah.
close off strong. And like I
For
said,
sure.
we'll definitely have a round two of continuing these conversations because there's so much to dive into, bro. Like
Yeah.
could be here for like 3 hours and probably still
Could
just be
chop
at
it
the
up for
surface.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, man. But I want to ask some stuff that is related to joy, culture, and connection. Like I said, I want to make sure there's some laughter,
For
an
sure.
opportunity to reminisce on some good times, which we've already done with the makeshift water parks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Ass whippings,
And the hassle and the belts
The
out.
scene show.
I'm sure that was triggering for someone out there, but hopefully in a way that made you smile a little bit because you've gotten past it. And if not, that's where therapy can help. So
Yep.
just circling back on that. But I want to ask you this one. You've shared that you're obviously you're proud of your Salvadorian and Mexican roots. What are some cultural traditions, foods, or moments that instantly take you back and fill you with pride?
Yeah, and when I think about Latinidad, what's crazy is I really start to embrace it more once I hit college. I think growing
Hmm.
up in Texas, Chicano is a very strong term in the
You
sense
did say
that
that.
a lot of
Hmm.
people will hide the actual traditions, the real traditions,
Hmm.
because of this desire to be Americanized
Yes.
and all that.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was in college, I really got to embrace tradition. I joined the Latino
You
fraternity.
did
Shout
say
out to
that.
Sigma
I
Lambda
was gonna
Beta.
say, go ahead, shout
International
them
Fraternity
out.
Incorporated.
Go do the moves. I mean,
Shout out, shout out, shout
levántate.
out. But I really started to really embrace my identity and my culture, and there was so much power in that.
Yeah.
And so, to this day, what I love about Latinidad and what I love about our culture and what I love about being in the realm of being Mexican and
Hmm.
Salvadoran is that no matter what, it's the moments that bring people together that's centered around joy. We can have so much struggle in our
Oh
life,
man.
but one asada
Yeah.
will turn it upside down.
Dude, a
And so,
birthday with the piñata?
yeah, and
Like,
I'm the person that will have the asada. Like I love to cook,
yeah.
and like cooking and embracing traditional Mexican dishes and putting my own flavor and spin on it
Mm-hmm.
is one way that I get to celebrate and elevate my culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always cooking for the suegros, always having the
Mm.
asada, and always giving a space to be able to extend that part of me because I think there's so much joy in that.
Yeah.
And I think being Mexican and Salvadoran, there's so much color, there's so much beauty. When you think about Dia de los Muertos and you think
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
embracing, our lost ones and how we do it in a manner that celebrates.
Yeah.
I think, we have had to do it that way because there's been so much struggle in our lives and our cultures that we've had to find a way to always find joy in the moments.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's beautiful about the culture. And I think that's what's beautiful about being able to embrace like the asada, the parties,
Yeah.
all that, like doing that. And so, you see me at a party, I'm the one dancing, like I'm doing it.
Good.
Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't learn how to dance until college, yo. Cause like I told you, my parents, like we grew up so religious that
Religious.
dancing was actually not allowed. I was like, what the fuck? I can't dance cumbia.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm like, I love to dance. And I
Yeah.
think dancing is another
Such a way
extension
of
of,
expressing
yeah, like,
yourself, bro.
I already know like my future wedding, like I'm going to do a whole choreographed thing. Like it's going to be, I want to be the person that's going to be viral because it was so fire like
Yeah,
that. I'm
yeah,
going to take months to practice. But I
Love
think
it.
dancing is another way that I get to celebrate myself, have joy. You see me on the dance floor, I'm like smiling. I'm just that
Good.
person out there. So,
Good.
it took a lot of confidence
Mm-hmm.
and building of my confidence to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that because I wasn't like that at first.
Yeah, and I love that you're highlighting this ability to transform into someone who can have confidence in doing that, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
want to minimize or dismiss some of the real experiences that you mentioned you had growing up, right?
Yeah.
With like bullying and just some of these other self-esteem issues, which believe me, I can resonate. And for maybe episode two, I can share a little bit more. But I just love that you gave yourself the permission to like embrace this new version of you that
Yeah.
aligns so much more with like what you've named makes you happy, bro. Because like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like isn't that what we're really striving for? To be happy,
Yeah.
as much as we possibly can in the midst of this world, this society, which can be chaotic, which can sometimes be discouraging with what's going on in the world. But how do we still find moments of joy and happiness within the practices, the people that we surround ourselves with, the way that we celebrate with family, or the way that we bring joy to students, or the suegros with cooking for them? So shout out to you, Esaú. I love that, man. Here's my question. Last question on behalf of that one. What's your go-to pupusa order? What's in the pupusa for you?
Um,
You keeping it plain, just cheese, queso
Nah, I
frijoles,
got
queso
to have the
chile.
frijoles, man. I got to have the frijoles. Lo roco,
You
like,
like
yeah,
oloroca?
yeah, I
Okay,
do like the lo roco
good
too.
for you. You can have mine
The
then.
chicharron,
See, that's what I'm on. I'm on
yeah.
the chicharron and queso.
Man, I haven't had a pupusa in forever, so
Oh man.
yeah. But I'm
Yeah.
trying that health grind. If you got some healthy pupusa recommendations, let us know.
Hey, in moderation, right?
Yeah.
Maybe split
Oh yeah, I'll
one.
eat
Maybe split
a
one.
quarter of a pupusa.
Just to
You
get the
know,
taste, bro.
yeah,
Just to not forget how good it is. No, I love it, man. Thank you so much. And I think you may already know this, but if you don't, then I'm sharing with you. But the mother of my daughters is Mexican and I'm Salvadorian, so my daughters are half
oh, there
Mexican,
you
half
go.
Salvadorian, man. So I think that's super dope, to have you here and kind of sharing on behalf of what that experience was like for you.
Yeah.
Here's the next kind of like fun question that I know you saw, and I'm excited to ask. Whether had been growing up in Texas, H Town, or once you got to UT and now you're in college, or even now as an adult, what album, artist, or song just got you through life, or still gets you hyped to this day when you hear
Yeah.
it?
Well, I'm not gonna say the name because there's a term that I never like to say as a
Got it.
Latino male, but
Okay, fair.
"See Murder," and I'm gonna hum it.
Okay,
It's like
okay,
dun na na na
okay.
na 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 dun dun na 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 na.
Yep, I
I
already
love
know.
that song because there and I was in the fraternity. I
Yeah.
think that's when I really started to come out of my shell, and I did stepping and strolling.
Nice. I
And
was gonna say, did
so
you have a stroll to that song?
it really, yeah. So we had a stroll called the King Stroll that
Mm,
nationally bros
everybody
across
knows.
everybody
I
knows.
love that.
And so if you're at a wedding,
Yeah,
even if like me and my 30-year-old body with busted knees
yeah,
and all that, I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna live my youth.
yeah.
Even though the next day I'm gonna be like, fuck, what I
Why'd
do
I
that
do
my knees are
that?
busted. But that song, like I think about me and my LBs and like we're just like walking around campus and we're humming it like nah,
Yeah,
and we're like
yeah,
doing the strolls. Even when I remember learning how to stroll and all that stuff, I sucked at first.
yeah. Takes
I
time.
think now I'm pretty good.
Yeah. All
But
right. You got the movements
but
down.
I think that one, and then there's just so many great songs back then, like my Dougie. Like I think Dougie is
Mm.
one that like
Oh, that was fine.
I think my Dougie is pretty fresh,
Yeah.
and then the All I Do Is Win
Oh,
Win
yeah,
Win no
yeah, yeah,
matter
yeah,
what,
yeah.
because I got to actually see T-Pain at Coachella, and it was just
Okay,
cool to kind
that's
of like
right. You
relive
did
that
go.
and be like, dang, I remember this song. You should just get the club lit,
Yeah.
like it used to just get everybody's hands up, and I was
Yeah.
like, yep.
Uh huh.
So, you gotta, those are some that I embrace to this day. And I just love all music. I love things that get me hype.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm super excited, man, to be able to come back and do another episode because I think another theme I would love to dive into with you is that of fraternity life, Greek life,
Yeah.
especially with it still being, in my personal opinion, more specifically here in California, like a foreign experience, right?
Yeah.
It's still something that you don't really see unless you go to college.
Yeah.
Or in certain regions, like it's like life, right? It's so
Yeah.
embedded within the culture of like certain regions and communities, especially when I'm thinking about like down south. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
might actually have a bunch of teachers, principals who are a part of Greek life,
Yeah.
right, to some capacity, and that can be like your early exposure. But here in California, at least more specifically NorCal or the Bay, because I don't want to generalize too much, like feel like it's still kind of rare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is why I do my best to wear my hat anytime I go to the gym, or I do my best when I've worked at schools to wear my letters because it always sparks the question, what is that? right?
Yeah.
And you get a chance to talk a little bit with just young people about what this is outside of maybe their perceptions based off of movies, based off of,
Yeah.
you know, what they've heard, which
Yeah.
typically is more associated, and I want to say this respectfully, but with
The
like
white Greek.
white
Yeah, yeah,
fraternities, you
yeah.
know what I mean?
And
And
we're at least for me, like it definitely wasn't that experience,
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, you know, it would be dope with what is, you know, respectful to share. Just like I would love to dive into that,
Yeah,
brother.
for
So I'm
sure.
excited for us to be able to do that at some point. I got two more questions that we're gonna close out with, Esaul. But before I even ask those, bro, I just want to tell you thank you. I appreciate you,
Appreciate you.
bro. Like I couldn't have imagined just like having created a more powerful, fun, and just like dope space than we've created right now. And I just want to acknowledge you for contributing to that. Um, so here are the two questions. The first one is, if you could go back and sit next to your 17-year-old self before college, before the career, what would you say to him that you feel like would have had a significant impact?
Yeah, and oddly enough, this was something that one of my therapists made me do once. And
Mm,
when I was thinking about this question, I teared up actually because, again, I was a kid that went through so much struggle.
mm-hmm.
I had so much pain inside of me. I would sit next to me, I'd give myself a huge hug,
Man.
and I would tell you, I fucking love you.
Yeah.
You're enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're everything that you're gonna want to be. You everything that you can be. Just trust the process.
Yeah.
Step into the uncomfortable. Push yourself. You're gonna be with the baddie one day. Like like
Right?
I'll whisper like, "Yo, she bad." So
Like
shout out to you, Bubby. So I think like I would just really, really just like honor myself by
yeah.
telling me I love myself because again, like I told you, it took a long time to realize that I had to love myself first before I can do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of trials and tribulations, broken relationships,
Yep.
seeking
Yep.
validation and things that didn't work for me. And I think that younger SIO needed to hear this. Like you don't need to seek validation from anybody else
Yep.
but yourself.
But yourself, yeah.
And so what I would do. I'd give myself a big hug and let me know like you're gonna struggle, you're
Yeah.
gonna hurt. You got to use that hurt in a positive way because you're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say.
Yeah. I appreciate it, brother. You know, and what makes me think about too is that 17-year-old not knowing how many lives he is then gonna go and change and impact, right?
It's the
Like that's
crazy
the
part,
wild
man.
part, right? Like
Yeah,
that 17-year-old probably just felt so in his own world, trying to figure out or like be curious, like where am I
yeah,
heading, you know? And now
yeah,
you've probably have given literally that hug to probably a 17-year-old who's really needed it, right? A young man who's probably like been going through the brink of just like a of breaking down, and yet you know
yeah,
your presence, you know, that hug, that genuine hug that you've probably given, I know for a fact you've given, has probably been exactly what they needed, right? And so in
yeah,
some ways, like we've hugged our 17-year-old self, just not within our physical bodies but within the bodies of others who have gone through similar struggles, you
yeah,
know. So
for sure.
I love that, brother. Thank you so much for just sharing that so openly and honestly. And then the last question I got for you today, which bums me out, man. I really do wish it made sense to record 3-hour episodes, but I know our attention span as society today. You
Yeah,
know
you
what I
got
mean?
20 seconds at most.
Exactly. I have to do these clips for y'all. But for those of you that do watch the full episode at any point in time, just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You know, I do this in addition to the many roles that I play, but it's because I always end up feeling so uplifted and inspired by the people that I get a chance to sit next to. And this has been exactly the same. And so I thank you again, brother, for that. But the question is, last question to close out. What do you want your students, your family, your partner, your future children, or loved ones to remember most about you? Not including your titles, but just your presence.
Yeah, that I will always find a way to bring joy.
Hmm.
I think that's part of the struggle that I've gone through. It's part of like the sacrifices that I've made, my lived experiences. No matter what, I like to be that person that will bring the energy to the
Mm-hmm.
space, that will bring the joy to the space. When you're like, I'm sitting in a meeting and it's like, oh, we're doing something that's super technical, but I get to bring joy somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to be remembered for. I want
Mm-hmm.
to be that person that uplifted others, that brought joy, and that served as an example that even through the struggle, you can survive, you can succeed. And it all centered around joy.
Yeah.
Like when you really can embrace that, and you really can just honor yourself with finding joy in your life, like that's what I want to be remembered for.
Yeah,
On my
yeah.
tombstone, I was like, he made everybody laugh.
Yeah,
You
bro,
know,
for
and so
sure.
and it's not that like you can't take me seriously either because
Yeah,
you'll find out too.
yeah.
But like I think it's so important to elevate other people, and one of the best ways you can do that is making someone smile,
Yeah,
like asking someone about their day, like making people feel seen, and that's one way that I hope to be remembered. Like I felt people, I allowed people to feel seen.
yeah.
I brought joy to the table, and I made those moments special.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and trust me, we need that in this world, bro. Our young people need that. Heck, adults need that.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you for taking so much pride in wanting to provide that. Because that does take mental, emotional energy to care so much about
Yeah.
wanting to bring joy into the lives of people, right? Like that's true. It's still coming from a place of wanting to give, and I appreciate you for just feeling like you have so much to give that you want to go ahead and do that. That's a superpower. I'm a firm believer we just need so many more people like yourself in order for us to reach a world that I think will be a happier, more peaceful place. And so,
Yeah.
thank you for contributing to that in the way that you do. Um, but that is the end of this episode, y'all. Thank you once again for joining us. You will be seeing clips on Instagram, but for those of you that find it in you the time to watch the full episode here, I know for a fact you got something really inspiring and powerful out of it. And so, thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a wrap.